Okay, now for those who don't normally like attending, okay, for some reason they don't attend and they want to rely on recordings, this is what happens. I usually forget like to record now, like now. I've talked about audit sampling, like most of the information, but I can't go back to it. Okay, but it's fine. They will find out catching up. Okay, so they're saying under the topic, we have a couple of methods, actually three. Okay, on the way we select items that we need to test for or that we need to audit. Okay, selection of items that we need to audit. So there are three ways. One is where they consider all the items, what they call 100% of the items in the population. Okay, so but this is always, it's not really in practice, it's not common practice, unless it is for a particular reason. They're looking for fraud, they're looking for, it's an investigation and not an external audit. Otherwise, it will take a whole time, a considerably long time, and secondly, a lot of resources. For me to check all the items, our fees must be somehow outstanding. Okay. So that's one, choose all the items so to perform substantive procedures on the items. Okay. Okay, that usually have high value items or high value. Then there's what we call the CAAT. Yes, this one is, we call it, it's more of a software that does audit. I don't remember it completely in full. Is it computerized auditing techniques? If someone remembers, you can share with me. CAAT in full. It has something to do with computerized auditing techniques. Okay, so you can either use computerized auditing techniques or you perform substantive procedures manually. Okay, then the other way we do selection of items during audit is when we test all items with certain characteristics. That you see items that have a particular characteristic and then you choose those. Okay, an example is if they are high value items. Okay, items that have high value, you can choose those. They have the same characteristic because they have high value, all of them. Then you choose those ones only. Okay, and you perform your audit procedures on them. Or you look at items of a certain amount. Okay, maybe you say, you know what, since you have so many items and we're seeing they vary in value, we shall just take the ones that are above 10 million. You look at those. That's another way. Then among others, so let me not go into that. Let's go to now audit sampling, which is really our interest. So the other way auditors choose items on which they want to test is audit sample. Okay, I've already talked about it briefly. Here you just choose a representation of the population, a small number. Yeah, thanks, Pretty. It's computer-assisted audit techniques. Yeah, thank you. So I'm still talking about audit sampling. Here, what we do is you choose a sample. If you come, like I already said, if you come to BSA and you want to look at all the students, you just choose a number of students, depending on the technique of sampling that you're using. And then whatever you find out from those few represents the entire BSA. Okay, so it's a common technique that they use, auditing sampling, and that's why it's a topic of its own. So you have two types of sampling. You have the statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling. Statistical sampling, usually it has to do with probability, but also we use what we call random selection. You select at random, where everyone has a chance to be selected, to be part of the sample. Okay, so we say random selection of items, and then as we select, of course, we're using probability. The chances of someone being selected among the sample, it's just probability. So we're saying random selection of sample items, or the use of probability theory to measure sampling risk and evaluate sample results. Okay, so at the back of our mind, as we sample, as auditors, we want to be sure that we avoid sampling risk, okay, and then also avoid we find a way of evaluating the sample results. Now, under non-statistical, we don't use random sampling. It's more of judgmental. An auditor uses judgment to come up with a sample. Either we'll say, let's just consider high value, for example. That's the auditor's judgment. Because of the risk that he sees in an entity, and from his experience, he has been auditing since, he has an idea of what he thinks the sample should look like. And that way he uses judgment and skill. And therefore, to help him to estimate the sampling risk and also evaluate the sample results. Okay, so what is sampling risk itself? I already talked about it, so just read the way it is here. They say that it is a risk that the auditor's conclusion based on a sample may be different from the conclusion that would be reached if the entire population was selected to the same audit procedure. Okay, that we're saying if you choose a particular sample, and we're saying BSA, you chose a few students and they said BSA is hard. Yeah. If somebody came and asked the entire BSA, will the overall conclusion be that BSA is hard? Okay. So if there's any chance that he will say, the population will say otherwise, then we say there's a sampling risk. So as auditors choose samples, they want to minimize sampling risk as much as possible. Okay. Then we go to non-sampling risk. Non-sampling risk, if you don't sample, oh, okay, you have sampled, but other risks that arise out of just sampling that are not involved with sampling. For example, the mode of substantive procedure that you're choosing, the tests that you're performing, if they are wrong, for example, now that is non-sampling risk. It has nothing to do with you sampling. Okay, so those are two risks, two different, but you appreciate as you can see. So for example, they gave you examples of non-sampling as the use of inappropriate audit procedures, misinterpretation of audit evidence, okay, where you look at an audit evidence and then you don't understand it and use it wrongly. Failure to recognize a misstatement or deviation. If you fail to see it, like it is for most of us, yes. Whenever they give us a case regarding something, because you don't know a standard or you don't know or you have forgotten, you miss it out. Now, that is non-sampling risk. Okay, so we have those are two main that we look at audit sampling, but they all end up being three. That you have sampling risk, you have non-sampling risk, and what you call a detection risk. The auditor must do everything in his power to minimize these risks. Okay, so how do we design a sample as auditors after appreciating the two techniques that you have, statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling? How do we design a sample? Okay, and also after appreciating that, as you sample, be aware of sampling risk. Okay, so one is you want to consider the procedure of the purpose of the audit procedure. Okay, what's the purpose? Okay, like I already told you, for example, if you're giving just reasonable assurance, yeah, reasonable assurance, you want to just raise people's confidence regarding financials produced. Do you need to look at the entire population? Do you need to look at 90% of the population as your sample? I don't think so. Okay. If you're giving them assurance, reasonable assurance, you may want to consider maybe 50% or 60%. You have gone beyond it. So the purpose of the audit procedure is very, very important. If you're looking at an investigation, you're doing forensic audit, of course, you want to look at almost every item. So your sample may be as big as the population itself, maybe 99.9%. Okay, then consider the characteristics of the population. That's the other thing you want to consider. Here they're saying whether stratified or what they call stratification, where you have small groups within the big group, or value-weighted selection is appropriate. Okay. Then design a sample size sufficient to reduce sampling risk to an acceptably low level. As a matter of fact, the bigger the sample size, the lower the sampling risk. Because if you're looking at almost all the items of the population, then the risk of you having sampling risk is very low. Okay, because you have looked at almost every item in the population. So that's what we mean. The bigger the size of the sample, the lower the sampling risk. Okay, so that is it. The four stages: you consider a purpose, look at the characteristics of the population, and then design a sample size sufficient to reduce sampling risk to an acceptable low level. So then we say that sampling risk can lead to two types of wrong conclusions. Actually, okay, there are two, but they are twisted in a way. Okay, that one, if somebody performs test of controls, then the sampling risk will bring about the fact that controls are more effective than they are actually. Okay, that when you make a sample and it's wrong, or for some reason it's not the right one, if you perform a test of control, we are saying that you may end up saying that test of controls are working effectively, yet it's not true. Okay. Then the next one, which is substantive tests, what you call a test of detail. Okay. Here, if you have a small sample, or if you do a sample and you end up having material misstatements that do not exist, yet they actually exist, then you're saying there will be a sampling risk. Okay, I hope we are picking something here. Okay, that you look at the tests that you're performing, because remember, under audit, we have two main tests, I think, two main procedures. We have test of controls and test of details, what you call the substantive tests or procedures. Okay, the test of controls just look at you're mainly commenting on the effectiveness of internal controls. All right. And then for test of controls, you're looking at material misstatement. Right. So we're saying where sampling risk comes is if you look at the sample and you're performing test of controls and you make a wrong decision, or you come up with the wrong conclusion by saying that the controls are effective, yet they are not. That is a sampling risk. Okay, because you're studying a sample and in performing test of controls, you came up with a conclusion that's not correct. So the same thing with test of details, or what you call substantive procedures. That you are looking at a particular sample. If you conclude through your test of details that there is material misstatement, or there's no material misstatement, yet there is, then we say that we have a sampling risk at hand. Topic 5. Yes, this is topic 5. So as you will see, this is for the actual test state, that for test of controls, when you said controls are more effective than they actually are. Okay. Or you will say that for test of controls, that controls are not effective than they actually are. This part here, number 3. Okay, less effective than they actually are. So something with test of controls. When you say a positive, it's actually negative. All right. So we continue. I hope we are covered. Then what do we do as auditors? Okay. Yeah, we said the lower the risk, the auditor is likely to accept, the greater the sample size. Okay, I already told you that sampling risk is minimized by the size of the sample. The bigger the size of the sample, it means that you're almost looking at the entire population, and therefore there's no sampling risk. Yeah, or if it's there, it's minimum. Okay, so because of that, auditors who don't in any way like risks, okay, then they will try to increase the size of the sample so that they minimize the sampling risk. Okay, so sample size can be determined using statistically based formulas or judgment. This one, we already talked about it. There is statistical and there is none statistical way of sampling. Okay, then which factors do you consider when you're coming up with the sample size for test of control specifically? Okay, so there are several. One is that to what extent do you want to rely on operating effectiveness of controls? Okay, the greater the reliance on the operating effectiveness of controls, the larger the sample size. Okay, that for if you want to rely on test of controls, for example, only, yeah, you want to rely on test of controls for your audit procedure so that you have less substantive tests. Then you have to create a big sample size so that you don't miss out anything during the test of controls. That's what they mean here. The next point is tolerable rate of deviation. How big is it? Okay, if it is low, like by tolerable we mean as auditors, how much difference or deviation can you tolerate as an auditor? If it is low, if you can't tolerate any differences, for you want perfect, then you may want to consider a large size sample so that you look at least the entire population almost. Okay, then next point is expected rate of deviation. As auditors, as you are coming up with your plan, what was your expected rate of deviation? Okay, of course, if it is high, then you want to consider a large sample size because you don't want a scenario where you have so many differences, okay, and you were not able even to detect them, right? Then the greater the desired assurance, confidence levels. This one I already talked about it. I said that if the job, okay, if the job at hand wants absolute assurance, they want so much of confidence, then you don't want to sample. You want to just consider maybe the whole population. But where you have sampled, it must be a very large sample. Okay, so the greater the desired assurance or confidence level, the larger the sample size. Then a large population has a negligible effect on sample size. That the size of a population does not tell us how we should sample. Okay, it's supposed not to really give us any influence just because the population is 2 bags. Yeah. Someone saying something. Because if you want to say something, you can maybe raise up your hand or something. Then I get to know. Okay. So where were we? Yes, I was saying that the population size is not supposed to influence your sample size. Okay, don't say that because there are only 10, then I'm going to sample maybe 2 or 1 or 9. No, you don't sample based on the population. The population really have a minimum effect on your sample size. Sample size is supposed to be based on what we just looked at. How you want to rely on your controls, what's your tolerable rate of deviation, what's your expected rate of deviation, what's your confidence levels or assurance levels. It's what we depend on, not on the size of the population. Okay, so they wanted to also talk about the factors that may consider sample size for substantive tests, what we call test of details. Okay, so here one is that the assessed risk of material misstatement, is it high? If it is high, then you want to have a large sample. Okay, because the large sample means that you're not going to miss out anything. Okay, chances of you missing out anything are very few. Then the higher the assurance level, as we already talked about it. Tolerable misstatement, we already talked about this. Okay, the expected misstatement, as you can see, they're similar to what is up there. The only difference that here it's misstatement, yes, it was more of controls. Then a large population, I already told you, it has really negligible effect on sample size. You can't base on the population to make your sample size. Okay. Then we go to techniques of how we can sample. Okay, under statistical methods. So we have mainly 2. Okay, but there are two others as well. So one is random selection. Random selection, it's as you're aware, you just come and pick randomly. Okay, there's no form of bias. There's absence of bias on you coming up with an item. That's what they call random sampling. Ensure that all items in the population have an equal chance of selection. Okay. Then systematic selection, it is, as you can hear the word, it is systematic. However, usually the first item that you choose is chosen at random. Okay. So they use systematic is such that it uses an interval that if you have 10 guys lining up, okay, and you want to use an interval of 2, or maybe let's use 2. Yeah, I'm saying that from 0 to 2, or from 1 to 2. Let me use a bigger population. Let's say 20. Okay, you're 20 guys, and you want to choose you systematically. Okay, so assuming you want 5 members to make up the sample, how we choose those 5 is such that we first appreciate that since there are 5, the interval is supposed to be 4. Okay, by getting the total, which is 20, divided by how many you want, those are 5, meaning that the interval can only be 4. Okay, you group them in 4s, and then you choose maybe the first. Okay, so how we choose the first from the first 4 is randomly. Okay, you say maybe the third person, then you shall choose. Now, when you choose the third person, for you to choose the next person that is supposed to make up the sample, you add that interval. So it will be 3. When you add a 4, it will be 7. So you choose the 7th, then you add 4, you choose the 11th, you add 4, you choose the 15th, you add 4, you choose the 19th. Those will make the 5 guys in the sample. Okay. What's the difference between deviation and misstatement? There's no difference between deviation and misstatement. Okay. Deviation, you're saying that by how can I put it? If you're expecting, say, 20,000, okay, and you end up seeing 22,000, the deviation is at 2,000. So this 2 can either be a negative or a positive. Okay. Misstatement is supposed to be ideally the same as deviation. Like I've already told you, they're the same. The only thing is that under substantive tests, what we call misstatements, actually deviations under internal controls. That for internal controls, most of them are not really like quantified in terms of amounts. Because for internal controls, if you're saying we have segregation of duties, you're looking at are these guys applying this segregation of duties? That's why you look at a particular maybe a payment voucher, and you're looking for a preparer who has signed, you're looking for a reviewer who has signed, you're looking for authorization, person who has signed. Okay, so there's a bit of a difference because for misstatement, it's more of amounts. Whereas for internal controls, it's more of procedures. Are they being followed? Okay, so that's where we have deviation is all about being away from what we expect. Okay, even misstatement, the same thing, being away from what we expect, but this time it's in terms of amounts. That's 20M for giving us 25M. Where is the 5 coming from? Okay. Okay, I hope I've answered you right there. So systematic, I just talked about, I've used my own example. You can use the one that they shared here. They said that under systematic, it involves selecting items using constant interval between selections. That the first interval having a random start, and this is how we go about it. That if you're looking at the population of 40, like they put it for you here, they said, no, actually population of 800, but you want a sample of 40. Okay, 800, a sample of 40. So we're saying the way you come up with this 40 here as your sample, you're saying one is establish its interval. That how many 40s are in 800. Then you say there are only 20. Okay. So we say now, how do I come with this 20? It means that this 800 is going to be grouped into 2020s. Okay. You arrange them in such a way that you have 20, first 20, second 20, third 20, fourth 20, until you have 40th 20s. When you add them together, you have 800. Okay. Now from those groups, you're supposed to choose 40 of them. So what we do is the first person we choose from the first sample, I mean from the first cluster, is supposed to be at random. Okay. The guys in the first 20 have equal chances of being selected, but we only select the ones like this. So we say, assuming randomly you chose the fifth guy in the 20, you're saying the one that comes later is supposed to be systematic. You just add 20 on the first 5. Okay, so that's the fifth, add 20. That means that the second element of the sample will be 25. Then you add 20. The third element will be 45. Like that. I hope I've made sense. Maybe let me try to illustrate it here. Okay, we're saying I'm going to use a smaller number, assuming you have 20 guys, 20 in your population. In your population, but you need the sample of maybe 5. I already said. Okay, so how we choose the 5 is first appreciate the interval. The interval will be given by population divided by the sample that you want. So it will be 4. So meaning that you have the first 4. Put dots 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then you have another 4. Another 4. Okay. So those make 20, but they're in intervals of 4. So we say that the way you choose the first guy, the first person, it is at random, and use it from the first group. Okay. So assuming you choose this, should make them different. I don't know. Assuming I choose this third person here, the one in the third, the third n is my first element of the sample. Now to choose the next one, it's saying you're going to get the third n and add the interval 4. So this will give us the what? The 7th n. Okay, so far now in my sample I have the third n and the 7th n as part of my sample. Then the next, choose the next. Okay, now to choose the other sample, remember I need 5. Okay, so to choose the second element of the sample, I get the 7th. Choose the third element of the sample. I will have this 7th. They're being systematic, eh? That's what they mean. You have the 7th n, and then you add 4. You'll get now 11th. Okay. Then like that. So 11th, I still add 4. I'll get 15. And the lastly, you have 15th. And 15th n, then you're adding a 4. Then you have 19th. Okay, so meaning that in your sample, you're going to have the third n, the 7th n, the 11th, the 15th, and 19th as your 5 n's that you have in the sample. So that's what we mean by systematic. Okay, what's the difference between, okay, let's answer that. So we continue. Then you have haphazard selection. Haphazard selection is more of, it's not systematic, it's not random, but still a selection. So what happens is here, they choose, saying that this is where a sample is selected without following a structured technique. You're not being, you're not saying it's random, you're not saying it is systematic, but you have come up with a sample. Here they're saying, for example, you just say the first 2 pages in cash book. Okay, if you have maybe several cash books, maybe there are 5, you choose the first 2 pages from each cash book. Okay, that's what you call haphazard selection. Okay, so they're saying an auditor may not be completely unbiased. Okay, because if you're choosing, why do you say the first 2 receipts? Why not the last 2 receipts, for example? Why not the first and the last receipt? Okay, so still you're saying there's a form of bias ideally. So they're saying that the auditor may not be completely unbiased in the sample selection, as one may avoid items that are difficult to reach out, or the first and the last items on the page. Okay. Then we have what we call block selection. Okay, block selection is let me see, why is the third and the first sample? The third N is like I said, you choose it randomly. That the first 4 N's that we saw, for you to come up with an item from those 4, we do it randomly, what we call random selection. So I just said, what if randomly chose the third N? Okay, so someone else could choose the first N, another could choose the 4th N, the other could choose the 2nd N. It's random. Okay. I hope I've answered you in that regard. So the first time you're choosing, it's random. Then now you apply now systematically by adding +4, +4, +4, or by adding the interval. Block selection is where blocks of conscious items in a day or week or month or numerical sequence from the population are selected to check whether certain items have particular characteristics. For block selection, you were saying that any items that are unfamiliar or unusual, okay, are chosen either in a day or in a week, or somehow in a sequence that is, for some reason you feel like, I think let's try with these numbers. Okay, they are block in nature that you choose. If you decided to choose a day, if you're going per day, then you choose in every day. If you're going per week, you choose in every week. If you're going per month, you choose in every month. But you, like the word it says, contentious items. That item that you have doubt on it, that are so, in a way, they're unfamiliar or they look suspicious. Okay, but you make sure this systematic in a way. That's what makes it block still. But if you're going per day, saying you want to choose already sell on Monday, we sold matoke, rice, and cement. Somebody will be like, how can somebody buy matoke, rice, and then cement? So the contentious item may be cement in that regard, because the others are foods, this one is not. Okay, and among other samples you can use. Okay, so that's block selection. Then you have the monetary unit sampling. This one here we normally look at more value, or we attach cost or the value of the item so significantly or so seriously. Okay, then they say that here the main methods are random selection, systematic selection, and haphazard selection. They're the most common ones. Pattern block selection. Okay, block, I've just said that what makes something a block is more of how would I put it? It's more of systematic, or it's more of like you see, if it's a brick, saying bricks, okay, they don't really differ any significantly. They're the same. Now here, whenever you're choosing, you choose, if you're deciding to go with maybe a particular time of day,